All right, perfect. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third installment of our Career Insight series for the spring semester. Careers for Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies majors. My name is Jiang, and I'm an advisor and program coordinator here at Beyond Barnard. We're going to be hearing from 4 alums today. Just waiting on one more alum. Hopefully she'll be joining us soon. Thank you so much to our panelists for making the time to join us. I'm going to drop the bios of our alums in the chat in just a second. There will be an audience Q&A at the end of our program. So for our students in the room who are interested in asking our panelists a question, feel free to unmute yourself when the time comes. Okay. So to get started, we'll do introductions. So for our panelists, if you could speak on what your current role is, as well as what sparked your initial interest in the work that you're doing now, we'll start the discussion off there, and anyone can jump in.
Well, I can. Oh, go ahead,
Linda.
Sorry. Yeah, sure. I'm happy to get started. So my name is Devan Shea. I use she, her pronouns. I graduated from Barnard in 2010. Back then, the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies major was called Women's Studies. So I currently am Deputy Director at the Policy Advocacy Clinic at UC Berkeley School of Law. I've worked here almost 5 years. I kind of joined by accident. I was a graduate student in the policy program at UC Berkeley, where I was a student in the clinic. So this clinic, I can talk a little bit more about what the clinic is, but it's a law school clinic, but it's interdisciplinary. It enrolls law and public policy students and focuses on policy advocacy. And so as a student in the clinic, and I just wanted to get any hands-on experience I could while I was in grad school. Even though, the area of criminal systems reform was not something I expected to land into, I got really interested as I was working on campaigns to abolish fees and fines in the juvenile system in California and other states. And so I just stayed, and I've been there ever since. So I can pause there maybe and pass it to you, Linda.
Thanks, Devan. I'm glad I went after you because I'm a Berkeley grad too. I did my PhD at Berkeley.
Oh, cool.
So yeah. And obviously I was at Barnard, graduated in, I was class of 1995. I have a PhD in art history from Berkeley. I'm an associate professor of art history at Drexel University, which is here in Philadelphia. Why did I get interested in specifically art history? That happened at Barnard. It was my junior year. I went with a friend who was shopping around for classes. I didn't know what art history is. Not that many people do. I mean, it's a really rarefied discipline. And I went with her, and the lights went down and the slides went up, and a professor stood up and was talking about like paintings of naked people, and I was like, I'm hooked. And so yeah, I've been doing that ever since.
Awesome. All right, well, I'll jump in. So I'm Ellie Puccio-Williams. I use she, her pronouns. I graduated in 2016 from Barnard with a WGSS degree. I also concentrated in race and ethnic studies. I'm currently a third-year litigation associate at Akerman LLP. I do a range of commercial litigation, specifically focused on real estate, hospitality, and the healthcare staffing industry. I also have a pretty robust pro bono practice. I focus on asylum-related issues, LGBT liberation, as well as reproductive justice. For me, what sort of got me thinking about a career in the law certainly has to do with my own identities. You probably wouldn't know this by looking at me, but I'm biracial, I'm queer. And so for me, I think like knowing sort of like who I was, and then when I went to Barnard, sort of thinking about how our identities shape our experience with the law and how we can interact with a radically different set of legal paradigms depending on who we are and our identities. To me, that was something I very much wanted to have a career in to explore further. So for me, when I went to law school, I felt really torn sort of between whether I go in the public interest direction or start working at a law firm. To me, those felt like a really real tension, and that you really had to pick which sort of lane you went into. So I specifically went to NYU Law, which is known for having a really strong public interest department. And having a lot of graduates that sort of end up practicing in that field. So I went there feeling like, okay, I've got the best of both worlds. I can sort of pivot whichever, and that will work out well. So I spent some time interning at Lambda Legal, loved the impact litigation space, particularly focusing on LGBT issues. But then I kept hearing, okay, well, going to a law firm can give you good training. And I didn't quite know what that meant as a litigator, but I was like, okay, I'll give it a fair shake. If I don't get hired, I don't get hired. We'll see what happens. But I'd say, between my summer experience, which was a little strange because it was the 2020 summer, as you all can imagine, it was not sort of what was normal. But as I've been practicing for 3 years now, I am so pleased with my decision. I, at this point, don't plan on sort of pivoting out of the sort of like corporate firm type space, because I feel like I'm able to do good with my pro bono practice, but also like the work I'm doing is just something that is exciting every day. Every day looks different. So yeah, I'll stop talking now. So I'll pass it off.
Beautiful. And I saw our fourth panelist, Helen, has entered the Zoom room as well. Helen, we're starting off with introductions. So the floor is yours. What is your current role, and what sparked your initial interest in the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, it sounds great. Hey, everybody, I'm Helen. Sorry I joined a little bit late. My previous call went over a little bit, but yeah, so I graduated from Barnard in 2022. I'm currently working as a consultant. Specifically, my focus is in corporate and growth strategy. So doing a lot of market expansion, et cetera, products with different clients. Specifically at this moment, my industry focus is in industrials. So all the weird stuff like utility, HVAC, like locomotives, et cetera. But I've also worked on sustainability and consumer cases as well. And yeah, I think what makes me want to do consulting, I think I have a very similar rationale to, I think, Allie, which is I really want to sort of try out different things. And consulting has always been this career where it seems that you can really develop all these different sorts of skills, but also being able to explore a lot of different areas and industries. So I think, yeah, that's really what makes me want to do consulting. And now I've been doing this for almost 2 years. I think I can definitely say that this is really a great training ground to develop not just analytic skills, but also communication skills. And you also get a lot of opportunities to really present to very senior clients and executives, which is really great. And you're also, on the other hand, being able to explore a lot of different industries and also functions. So not just high-level strategic thinking, but also what does an operations or implementation look like, et cetera. So yeah, I think really the interest to explore different areas and really to develop my skills quickly after I graduate is something that really drives me to consulting. And yeah, I think I've been really enjoying and liking the work I've been doing so far.
Beautiful. I love seeing that we have such a wide range of careers here and pathways, and I'm sure that our students are really curious to hear about what your day-to-day work looks like. So that'll be the next point of conversation here, and anyone can jump in.
So yeah, I guess I can happy to start. So for me, I think day-to-day can really vary, but for most of the consulting projects, there are really sort of like three main things you would do. One is that you will like interview experts and just sort of get their insights on the project. And then second piece to that would be you will also try to build different models. So whether that's calculating the total market size or et cetera. And then third piece is that you could also be doing surveys. So designing and actually like coding the surveys and sending those out and then analyzing the results. So for me, I would say day to day, it's a lot of, if you're, let's say, doing the call work stream, which is like interviewing experts, then probably you'll have 80% of the time of your day is spent on, doing those interviews and taking notes and synthesizing key takeaways from the calls. And then probably I think the rest of the 20 to 30% of your day would be like spent on meetings and just discussing with your team. Okay, so what are some of the key findings we have for today? How would that change our hypotheses moving forward? And as a result of that, what would be some of the key action items that we want to what would be some of the key action items for the rest of the week, et cetera? And what would be some remaining key hypotheses that we want to test with experts and also in our model? So yeah, I think probably day to day, 80% of the time is actually like doing the work, and probably the rest of that 20% would be spent on meeting with the team.
Happy to jump in next. And just to back up and explain kind of what the Policy Advocacy Clinic does, so you guys have some context. So we're an interdisciplinary clinic based at Berkeley Law School. We focus on non-litigation policy advocacy strategies to support community-led campaigns for change. So as deputy director, I'm currently responsible for teaching and training graduate law and public policy students on policy research and advocacy methods. I also support community-led campaigns, currently focusing on campaigns to end mass incarceration and invest in alternatives here in Alameda County, and campaigns to abolish fees and fines in southwestern states. Some of these campaigns are legislative campaigns. Some of them focus on other levers for policy change. I also develop new projects. I also work with the co-directors to keep the clinic running. So all the boring stuff like fundraising and budgeting and hiring. Just to share a little bit of what the day-to-day work looks like. So I just returned from parental leave. So my day-to-day right now looks like remembering how to work, which is is hard. But just to give you an example, yesterday, my day was like, I started off with a leadership team meeting. We discussed recruiting students for the fall and then hiring someone new for next year. Then we had an all-staff meeting. We discussed our updates from various staff on their state campaigns. We discussed some student supervision issues. Then I met with a colleague about a research report we're working on. We're working on looking into how reentry services are funded in California. So we were discussing some feedback we got about the report and some next steps for the research we want to do. And then I, answered a lot of emails. I got feedback on a fact sheet that I drafted about a bill that I helped pass in Arizona to help families with youth who are involved in the juvenile system understand how to access the bill's benefits. And then I met with again with our leadership team to prep for a meeting with the law school staff about our clinic budget. So it's actually kind of a lot of meetings. I'm realizing as I talk to you guys. But some other aspects of my job that also come up from time to time. Sometimes I'm asked to testify in state legislatures about the bills we're supporting. Often, when I have students I'm supervising, I have a lot of supervision meetings with them to go over the work that they're leading for our organizational clients and provide them with feedback on their research memos or their presentations. I sometimes, I draft bills and policies. I attend coalition meetings, submit public records requests to get data and information to support our work, or pulling facts and statistics or social science research to help clients develop messaging about their work. And then a lot of administrative stuff is the bad news. Like budget spreadsheets, preparing teaching materials. And then I also work with the other clinic faculty on designing and teaching the seminar that we teach, which is pretty fun. So that's a little bit about the clinic and the day-to-day.
Go. So I mentioned I'm a litigator, so I didn't even know what that word meant until I started law school. So for context, litigation, when you're a lawyer, is when you're dealing with like anything that involves a courtroom. So I'm not in the space of, drafting deals. So that's kind of where that separation happens. So as a litigator, every single day is different. I think something that's helpful to sort of break it down is like thinking about the life cycle of a case. And so that's kind of a snapshot of like where I could stand on any case and what I could be doing on a given day. So there's some cases where our clients are choosing to sue someone. And so that would be involving a lot of like fact investigation, getting documents from a client to sort of substantiate any claims that they have, raise ideas about what they could be bringing. So for those cases that are more affirmative, that if we're getting it from the very jump, there's some like research phase, so kind of like a pre-phase. After a complaint has been, and also to add, I do civil litigation. So I'm not dealing a ton with criminal related matters. I don't do white collar defense. So I'm not really at all touching like the criminal justice side of things. So just in civil suits. So after a complaint is filed, you then enter into the discovery phase. So that's also a lot more fact investigation. You're sort of exchanging requests back and forth for documents, reviewing a lot of documents so that you have a full understanding of what actually happened here. Are certain claims right? Do we need to be lodging any sort of counterclaim, anything like that? And I represent plaintiffs and defendants. So that can look a little bit different depending on who we're representing. Then there's the pre-trial. You're really gearing up for actually maybe litigating, going to trial. Then you have a trial. And then sometimes after that concludes, you have more work to do, whether you were entitled to a judgment or your client has to pay something out, something like that. So for me, all of my cases are just at totally different points in that sort of life cycle. So I'll sort of like think about today, for example. In one case, we're sort of trying to figure out if we need to intervene in this construction case in New Jersey. And so I spent all my morning today just doing legal research. So on Westlaw or Lexis, trying to see like, what are the cases out there that help support our position? And then after this, I'm going to write a summary of what I found, send it off to my boss. And then I'm switching gears and I'm turning over to drafting a motion to lift a stay on a case that I'm in Florida. So for me, it's like my case or my day to day is totally dependent on what that life cycle looks like. Unfortunately, it's a weird kind of position to be a litigator now because there's sort of this idea that like so many things are getting settled and not a lot of people actually end up going to trial. I've been practicing for 3 years and I've done mediations and arbitrations, but like I've prepped for trial twice and both times I never made it all the way, which for the last one was a good thing for our client. It was handled on a motion for summary judgment. We won, so that was great. But yeah, so unfortunately as a litigator, I don't find myself in front of a judge very often. But that's sort of my day-to-day can just totally vary depending on sort of like where I am with that life cycle.
The way it works for academics is like we have 3 clear categories of work that we do on a regular basis. One is teaching, which you are most familiar with. And then one is called research scholarship and another is called service. And so service is like some of the work that some of my fellow panelists describe, which is meetings. You end up having to write reports on the meetings. You end up having to advising students is another part of the service work that we do. So yeah, but the research scholarship part is, obviously your own, whatever projects that you're developing. And in terms of the day-to-day part, the good thing about academia is that the day-to-day changes constantly because we are on semesters or quarters. And so whatever your schedule is that is driving you crazy in that whatever 15-week term, it will come to an end. Okay, so and then you clean the slate and you start all over again, right? And so that's the really nice thing about it. And another really great thing about academic labor is that, well, if you have secure employment in it, which is very rare and it's getting rarer, but you do get to kind of set your schedule. So I work 2 days a week and I've been doing that for about 20 years effectively. The other days I'm free to go meet a friend to do yoga have brunch, but that doesn't mean that I don't come home and then I have to grind. And that happens too, because we have deadlines. But it means that there's a lot of flexibility in the day-to-day if you're an academic.
Thank you all so much. Linda, I love what you said about, cleaning the slate and starting all over again for semester. Yeah, it sounds
I feel that too.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. In terms of skill sets, despite the sort of varying work that you all do, it sounds like research skills are really important to have. Strong communication skills I see sort of carrying over. And then, of course, the inevitable administrative work is also a common thread here as well. And so just building off of that, how have you all found that the knowledge and or skills that you've acquired as a women's gender and sexuality studies major transfer to the work that you're currently doing now? And just a two-part question there. On top of that, what opportunities do you find to be nourishing for you in getting involved in your current field? Anyone can jump in.
I'll go. Because it's funny, I actually think about this a lot. Like I'm not quite in the middle of sort of my seniority, and I worked for 2 years, and so being in your late 20s, having to sort of be at the entry level point is sometimes a humbling experience. But something I think a lot about that sort of has benefited my career so dramatically really was my Barnard background and like having the WGSS major, because I sort of think about how like everything you're doing in that field is like deeply critical thinking, deeply analytical thinking, and substantiating your sources, like all of the things that go into, like, I mean, I can count on one hand the number of exams I had when I was in Barnard, or when I was at Barnard, and how at the end of each semester, like there's almost always a project or like a very robust research paper, something like that. And so for me, because despite having a profession that you always kind of think about a courtroom, most of my day is research and writing. And that's pretty much all I did with when I was a Barnard student, was going through the resources that we had provided to us in a syllabus, thinking outside of that, if it was, the nature of like more of a research type project, and then sort of thinking of a creative argument. And so that, to me, having that sort of the WGSS career is something, or excuse me, background, is absolutely something that is like critical to what I do every single day. And I think about how when I was a student, I'd have these sort of like aha moments. Like once you take was it critical approaches to social and cultural theory, and it like breaks your brain, and Professor Tadiar is like, giving you all these sort of revelatory moments. Like to me, it was sort of those moments in college that now I'm like, well, I'm so glad I had certain things deconstructed, because now I can just kind of see the world from a bigger point of view. And so even though, substantively, that's not the sort of nature of the work that I'm doing every day, the deeply critical thinking skills and analytical skills from the WGSS major are things that I apply every single day. And it is absolutely an honor to have a career where I get to think like that every day. I'd say in terms of the sort of like second piece of the question, like what has sort of like furthered my career, is definitely like sort of being in touch with the alumni network. I still have some of my closest friends are Barnard students, and so I don't think any of them are lawyers, but like those are the people who I feel like I can have conversations about, like compensation, or how should I navigate this like kind of strange workplace dynamic? How do I approach whatever that kind of issue is? And I feel like, because at least when I was a student at Barnard, like we were really encouraged to like talk about our wages, talk about some of like gender dynamics and things like that come up in the workplace. It's so easy for me to have those conversations with my friends who went to Barnard. And then I'd also say kind of tapping into the alumni network who are legal practitioners. So a partner at my firm also went to Barnard, and she like took me under her wing. She works in LA, and we just hit it off, and she has become such a great like informal mentor to me. So I would definitely say something that has at least like furthered my career is like leaning into the connections I already have at Barnard, and trying to extend that out to other alums as well.
Yeah, I totally agree on the piece on critical thinking, and also just your analytical skills. I have very similar thoughts there, which is that I really appreciate the insights that you're able to get, and really all the readings, like whatever. I still remember how blown away I was when I first read Foucault. But I think it's really the fact that when you're really learning about like how the social discourses are being constructed, and because I think gender studies it's really about understanding sort of the power structure and how they embody themselves in a society. I think it really just provides you with a totally like different perspective when you view all the different things, and you always think about okay, so like what's the so what of this? So even in our work, which is consulting, where you really advise clients on what are the different ways they can think about the market, what are the different ways they can think about this expansion, will there be other considerations, etc. I think it's just great to always think about, all right, so let's say, why is our client currently selling their products through this channel? Is there anything that could be improved there? What's really contributing to that? Like, what are some of the contributing factors that's making them having this decision? And if any of those could be improved, and how that could be changed, etc. So yeah, I think that ability to really think out of the box is something I really learned from the WGSS major. And also really something that I even still carries with me even after like graduating. So I still read a lot of books and stuff. Not really in gender studies, but in general related to power structure and social discourses, etc. So I really find that piece extremely helpful. And I think the other part is really the ability to think very critically, and really developing your analytical skills. So for me, I now still referring to, again, for more context, for consulting, you create a lot of slides for your clients, and essentially you do your final presentation readout on presenting your slides, and basically you're trying to tell a story to that client with that slide deck. So I still view that process as really like writing an essay. The difference is that instead of writing it on a paper, you're using a slide to create an essay, but still you have to have sort of a thesis and also the supporting data and qualitative insights there. So yeah, I think the really rigorous and rigid training that I got from Barnard, when punching out those essays and going through all those sources and articles, has been really helpful for me in my day-to-day now when I'm creating those slides and when I'm also trying to tell a story with those slides. And yeah, I think in terms of what's been really most nourishing for me, it's definitely the relationships that I was able to build during my time at Barnard, and friends that I got to know. We still really touch base really often nowadays, and they work in all these different fields like arts and movies and etc. So yeah, it's really great to sort of have a reminder outside of work, because I think especially in consulting, the work can be sometimes overwhelming. So I think it's important to keep in touch with all these like friends from college, where you can just keep reminding yourself that consulting isn't everything. Like, you still need to have a life outside of work. So yeah, I think that's something that's been very nourishing for me, that I really appreciate Barnard, that I'm able to really build those relationships that I'm able to carry with me even after I've graduated.
Yeah, I really agree with what's been said already. And I guess, for me, my work really builds on the radical social movements that we learned about, or that I know I learned about in my women's studies classes. And, learning how people developed theory as they were agitating for change, and or deployed theories that had been developed by academics or researchers as they're agitating for change, has really helped me in my work, because we are trying to support community groups who are trying to do very sort of practical, grounded in real things, to push forward reforms, but that need to have frameworks around them to kind of help us all understand, why are we in this mass incarceration moment? How do we get here? And, only by understanding how we got here can we figure out the right solutions for change. The people who are doing deep critical thinking about abolitionism, those are people that I first encountered when I started, when I, did the major at Barnard. Professor Tadiar also broke my brain. So, that was like, it was also just like a really, rewarding experience, like regardless of where it took me in my career, to be exposed to these new ideas, to challenge my critical thinking, to read difficult texts. I look back on that time in college and just think about how like it was such a important time to explore what you're interested in and give yourself permission to kind of like take a class you might not otherwise take, explore a topic that you're just interested in, seeing if you like it. And also seeking experiences outside of class that, could be rewarding. Like, I don't know if they still call it the Rape Crisis Center, but I worked at the Rape Crisis Center while I was a student, and I learned how to facilitate difficult conversations. And that's like the number one skill I use when I'm teaching, when I'm working in coalitions, when I'm talking to stakeholders. It's so, you never know kind of like the different experiences that you're going to get while you're in college, how they're going to shape and inform your career as you go forward. I definitely second what Ellie and Helen have said already about building relationships. This is how the world is run, is your relationships with other people, the people who will support you, the people who you will support. And so that's really important and good for life as well as your career. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I would add. I guess yeah, just to overemphasize maybe the reading and writing and critical thinking skills that we get at Barnard. I write stuff every day. I help graduate students improve their writing every day. I think it's one of the most important. Writing and also just communication skills in general is one of the most important skills, especially if you're interested in pursuing some, like an advocacy or activist type of career, to be able to craft arguments and persuade people, and help people understand your point of view. So yeah, that's what I would add.
I'm not going to do critical thinking since everybody already covered that. I will say mentorship, right? Which is like building relationships, but specifically with somebody older who is more established in a career. For me, that meant a faculty member at Barnard, Natalie Campen, who used to be the director of the program when it was called Women's Studies, but she was also an art historian. And I was drawn to her because she was the director of the Women's Studies program, and it just turned out that she was also an art historian. So she helped me a ton when I got to grad school. And even after I used to apartment sit for her in New York, like she'd go out of town and I would just like stay at her apartment, and we remained really close. And even after she retired, and she was so helpful to me, like she, like if you find a person like a Natalie Campen in your life, like a woman who is just, or, just any kind of elder who is just really grounded and warm. She was incredibly funny, but she also was like very pragmatic. Like she never sugarcoated what life on the academic track would look like. And so that was also really helpful to me. I think whenever you're in any kind of like professional track, it's always good to have like somebody who's a little ahead of you or a lot ahead of you, so you can kind of envision what your future, like what direction you could go in. I have to admit, I'm in a place where I don't actually, for the first time in my life, I don't have that. I don't have a person who I kind of consider like some kind of, a person approximate to me, who's ahead of me, and I can imagine what that would look like. But anyway, that's another career crisis that I have to work through. But I will say that I recognize now, looking back at my life, that was super helpful to me.
Um, we're reaching my final question to the panelists. So for our students in the room, prepare your questions, prepare to unmute yourselves. If you're feeling a little shy today, you can also throw your questions into the chat and I will read them aloud. Our panelists have already, spoken about some advice for our students, like networking, mentorship, really sort of diving into those critical thinking skill sets, right? But just to linger on this a bit more, what advice would you give to students who are unsure of what career path to explore following the WGSS major?
I think, I think my first instinct is to say it's okay not to rush it. I'm sure we all kind of like it's nerve-wracking, right? To graduate and be like, what am I gonna do? There are a lot of people and circumstances where you're like, well, I have to have a job. I need to make an income, and that's okay. You can try a job at first and figure out what you like and maybe don't like about it. And then you can start kind of honing in on what it is you want to do. And I would encourage people to think not just about kind of the field or the sort of substantive issues you're interested in, but also reflect on like, what are the kinds of tasks you enjoy doing in your day-to-day work? Do you like to be around and working with people? Do you like to be kind of by yourself? Trying different things and reflecting on that is also really important, because then you can kind of think through, like what do you want your like working life to look like? And as much as you can while you're still in college, trying different experiences, different types of internships, for example, or if you're doing work study jobs, you know, giving yourself some time and room to figure it out. And I didn't go back to grad school until I had been working for about 7-8 years. And I'm really glad that I took the time to make sure I understood what I wanted to do and how I could get there. What kind of graduate training I needed, whether I even needed graduate training to get to where I wanted to go. And some people do really well going straight to grad school after undergrad, and some people need to take some time. So just kind of, I would just encourage you not to rush it and allow yourself to have some different experiences, and then, let yourself figure out what feels good and what feels compelling to you.
Yeah, I think I'm also gonna add to that, which is also I just graduated like literally in 2022. So I think one thing I've tried to figure out when I was graduating is that I've always felt sort of stressed that I don't really know what I want to do. When I graduate, I'm like, oh my God, like I feel like a lot of my peers have really figured out like what they're passionate about, etc. But now I'm realizing that like it's totally not normal for you to not know like what you're most passionate about, and it's totally fine to spend a few years like sort of exploring that. And also, I think another thing that I find very helpful to keep in mind is that literally the first job that you do after graduation doesn't mean that you will be doing this forever. So it's a very dynamic process. So definitely like don't stress too much if you don't really know what you want to do for the rest of your life for now. And yeah, I feel, let's say like if you started off in consulting or other fields, definitely like take advantage of that and explore the different areas and industries, and test out what your interest might be. Because I think one thing I've also find really helpful is to like a lot of times you don't really find your passion, you just know, or you just get to know like what you don't like. So I think it's important to have all those like trials and errors and really have those opportunities to really explore and try out as many things as you want. And I think lastly, personally, I find it very helpful to just keep in mind that you can always choose a different path, and what you do now doesn't mean that you have to do this for the rest of your life. So again, back to the point on just really making sure you're taking advantage of all the different opportunities and being able to really explore and try out as many fields as possible.
Yeah, I find I'm just going to end up seconding the points made. But yeah, I think depending on sort of like what year you're at, one of the best parts about being at Barnard is that you're in New York City and there's really no shortage of opportunities, internships during the semester. I at least remember when I was a BSAR, the sort of parting line was, it was like there's on, I guess, handshake, whatever it was called when I was there, but there was 500 internships and like there was an internship for each person or some sort of number like that. So like really, I think like leaning into that, right? Like to the extent you can. And there's no harm in trying something in a range of different fields. So it really is sort of like worth your time to the extent you have time to do them, you know, to just dabble, absolutely try everything. I also second Devan's point about, you know, thinking about, you know, if you want to like take some time before you go on to a graduate program. I took 2 years off for law. That's like pretty normal to take anywhere between like a year to longer. Some folks were like, you know, married, had kids, and this was a totally separate and new career for them. So I really do think for me, at least in my career, taking 2 years was great. Like I felt like I had different things to contribute by the time I like went to law school. Like I'd had actual work experiences to reflect on. And then I also found, at least for me, when I then was interviewing for jobs, you know, I felt like I had actual answers to the question of like, okay, where was the time you struggled and how did you come out of it? Like all of those kind of annoying like interview questions, like I had real answers for that. Whereas at least when I was interviewing right after college for jobs, I felt like I was pulling on things where I kind of had to like force a narrative that didn't quite make sense. And like I'd worked a million campus jobs, I'd had internships, I'd had campus leadership, but it still felt really hard for me to answer some of those questions in an interview context. So then fast forward, by the time I was in my mid-20s in law school, I just felt really comfortable interviewing for jobs because I could sort of draw on my work experiences. So definitely, like, I think there's a huge value in maybe taking a little time before going straight through, because those are things that are then going to, you know, factor into your practice, whatever it is that you decide to do afterwards. I'd also piggyback off of the point about like thinking about like the life you want and the sort of like skills and things that you'd like to do. Something I know absolutely factored into like my decision to sort of be at a law firm, despite having amazing experiences like interning at places like Lambda. I did a externship with NAACP's Legal Defense and Education Fund. Like that was all super valuable, important work. But something that was really clear to me was that if that was going to be my day-to-day life, it can sometimes be really challenging to have your 9 to 5, but in law, it's usually, you know, 8 a.m. to whatever time you sign off. It's a lot of time to be focused on the rights and liberties of identities that I have. And there's always going to be sort of vicarious trauma, sort of like as it relates to working on some of those types of matters. And it just would have felt very emotionally draining to have the cases I was working on directly impact my freedoms, the freedoms of my family and friends. And I think it's important to be reflective of like, what can you do? Like, what do you have the bandwidth for? For folks who have the bandwidth for that emotionally every day, that's amazing. Like that work has to get done. But I personally find the balance that I've struck where I take my pro bono practice very seriously. I never not have something that I'm doing as it relates to the work that I feel like is important in this world. But there's also a little bit of separation there where I can sort of focus in on my corporate matters that I care very deeply for, but I know my day-to-day isn't saving lives. And so I think a lot of times, particularly for WGSS majors, the focus can sometimes be really like specific on social change, which is critical. It's one of the best things I got from this degree. But I think being honest with yourself about like, what can you realistically do day to day? And what feels right for you. So yeah, I feel like that's something I had to like really sit with for years. Like I really had to like grapple with that. And I'm now at a point where I feel like I've struck the right balance of what like morally feels right for me. And also just in terms of like what what sort of like works economically for my day-to-day. So I think like spending some time being self-reflective will ultimately serve you in the long run.
Linda, would you like to add any thoughts before we go into questions? Or I know speaking last, it's like everyone hits all the points, right?
No. I mean, they weren't necessarily points I was going to say, so that was good. And I'm probably the oldest panelist here, so I haven't really thought about careers in a long time. So this is, yeah, all of your suggestions were good. I'm ready to turn it over to the crowd.
Awesome. Yeah, for our students in the room, feel free to, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat so far. You can feel free to unmute yourselves and join in on the conversation. Sometimes we have a quiet group. And I like to, there's a question that I actually like to ask panelists that I actually reserved, just, you know, going off of the time that we have. And so as our students in the room just kind of think on questions, I'm gonna ask my question, which is actually a bit of a heavier question for our panelists. But I'm curious to know, what are your hopes for your career and your profession in general? And of course, everyone can jump in as they see fit.
Well, something I'm navigating right now is figuring out how to be a new parent and also work at the same time. It's pretty hard, but a lot of people do it every day. And so, you know, so that's something I'm figuring out, and I feel kind of actually, you know what? There's the director of our clinical programs here also went to Barnard, and after I had a baby, we sat down and talked about all the things that you face when you have kids and you need to go back to work. And so, you know, speaking of like kind of that Barnard network and how the kinds of support you can get from people. But I'd love to continue doing what I do. I love the fact that I get to use the sorts of skills that I do have and the things that I like to do, the types of tasks that I like to do in support of people who are driving forward radical campaigns. And, you know, I learned early in my career, like, I'm not the person who gets energy from being in the streets. I'm not the person who gets energy from, you know, knocking on doors. I am a person who gets energy from like reading stuff and then writing about it. And I'm really grateful that I found a way to like strike that balance, like doing the kinds of tasks that I like, but still getting kind of to work in coalition with people who are kind of bringing other types of skills and passions into a collective effort. So I hope I'll continue to be able to do this type of work going forward, and in the meantime, you know, find the right balance that everyone who works is looking for between enjoying your life and your relationships outside of work, and finding meaning in work. So yeah.
I'll go. Yeah, I feel like my answer is I don't totally know. I'm lucky in the sense that being at a firm, it's just a pretty clear path. You're an associate for 8 to 10, maybe 11 or 12 years, and then either a partnership happens or it doesn't. Sometimes you move in-house. I don't know if that's what I want to do. Maybe it is. I feel, like I said, I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. And so I'm just excited to be at a point where I could go either way and probably be pretty happy. And for me, I'm thinking a lot more about what skills I'm developing. I'm at a point where I know what I'm doing when I go to work every day. I feel like a competent lawyer and can really practice. So for me, it's like, how do I expand? So unfortunately, I'm not thinking, you know, a 5 to 10 year plan. I'm thinking much more specific to where I stand in the next like 6 months to a year.
I think sort of echoing that, I also don't really know what I'm gonna do in the future. But I would say though, for me, I really love arts and movies. So I think probably after a few years in consulting, I'm definitely considering a path where I will sort of like pivot and actually do probably like actually like make movies and then write scripts and stuff like that. But yeah, I think all is to say, I guess it's perfectly normal to be like in the exploring mode and not know what you want to do, but at the same time, really making sure you're developing your skills as you do your current job, which I think is at least great for me because I'm able to really explore all these different fields. And also there's really a big like thinking part in consulting, which I really enjoy. So I really enjoy the fact that I'm able to really have fun, but also develop my sort of thinking and analytical skills as I really figure out what I want to do in the future.
We seem to be losing students. I don't know what I want to do either. It's hard to imagine any kind of future individual or collective right now in higher education or education. It's pretty, yeah, it's ever since, it's not just COVID, it's like there's a new disruption every year and a half, AI, whatever, like it's too much. I would retire, right? Like I would just get up and walk out of this office right now if I could. But I got 15 years to retirement. I don't know if there's another chapter left for me in terms of working life. I don't know what that would be. But in the meantime, you know, I'm good at what I do. So I'm doing it.
I feel like that's such an excellent way to close out actually our event today. I'm good at what I do, so I'm going to keep doing it because I think it applies to you all to some extent, right? Especially being so good at what you do. I feel that during the student Q&A section, we have the participant number goes down a bit in the Zoom room. People get really shy, but I do often get sort of emails from students personally asking questions for specific panelists. And so, you know, if I do get emails, I'll be reaching out to you all. I just want to take a moment. Thank you again to our panelists for joining us today and providing such thoughtful insight. For our panelists, you'll be hearing from me. I'll put everyone in one email so that contact information can be exchanged amongst you all if you're interested. And for our students in the room, we hope to see you at our next Career Insights event. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.